It is 7 p.m. You just walked through the front door after a long shift, and your cat is sitting right there on the sofa. You drop your bag, lock eyes with them, and immediately move in for a warm, welcoming hug to melt away the day's stress. But instead of the affectionate purr you expected, the cat stiffens. Ears flick back, and they bolt under the bed the moment you reach out. You're left standing in the middle of the room, feeling rejected and confused, wondering why your genuine display of love is met with such cold avoidance. From the cat's perspective, your approach is not a gesture of affection. It is a high-stakes trigger for their sympathetic nervous system. To them, your looming silhouette and direct, unblinking eye contact are classic predatory signals, signals that spike their cortisol levels and activate the HPA axis. They aren't being mean or ungrateful. They're experiencing a surge of non-allostatic load, where their brain is screaming that their personal space is being invaded by a dominant, unpredictable force. You haven't done anything wrong. You've just been speaking a language they aren't wired to understand. To reset this dynamic, try this tomorrow evening when you get home. Simply walk into the room, sit down on the floor, and look at your phone or a book. Do not look at the cat, do not call their name, and absolutely do not reach out. Just exist in the same space, offering them the agency to decide if and when they want to bridge that gap. Observe how their body language shifts when the pressure of your attention is removed. You reach out to stroke the base of your cat's tail, expecting a purr, but instead, the animal flattens its ears and swishes its tail. Swishes it with sudden, sharp intensity. From your perspective, this is a friendly gesture of affection. From the cat's neurological reality, you've just triggered an overstimulation event. Their nervous system is not wired for prolonged, rhythmic tactile pressure, the kind of pressure humans associate with bonding. When you touch that specific region, you're inadvertently activating a highly sensitive zone, a zone that can rapidly shift their HPA axis from a state of calm, shifting it straight to a defensive threat assessment. Their sympathetic nervous system spikes, flooding their body with cortisol, as they perceive the interaction not as grooming, but as an inescapable intrusion. This isn't a rejection of your love. It is a biological mismatch. While you're operating on a human social framework of touch, as intimacy, the cat is processing your presence through a vastly more complex filter, a complex olfactory and sensory filter. Their vomeronasal organ is constantly scanning the environment, and their sense of smell is roughly 14 times more acute than yours, likely detecting chemical signatures on your skin that you cannot even perceive. That lingering scent of bleach, citrus, or even the residue of another animal acts as a persistent sensory signal that their brain interprets as a potential environmental threat. You aren't failing as a companion. You're simply broadcasting a signal that their nervous system categorizes as unsafe. To reset this dynamic, stop the active pursuit. Instead, simply sit on the floor nearby, ignore the cat entirely, and let your scent settle into the room without the pressure of an impending touch. By removing the demand for interaction, you allow their nervous system to downregulate, shifting them from a state of defensive vigilance back to a baseline of curiosity. It is 7 p.m., UV just returned home, and you instinctively reach down to scoop up your cat, expecting a warm welcome. Instead, you're met with a stiff body, a sharp turn of the head, and a swift retreat under the sofa. You interpret this as rejection, perhaps even a personal slight, but your cat's internal reality is governed by a vastly different set of priorities. From a neurobiological perspective, your sudden approach has triggered a rapid spike, a spike in their HPA axis, the body's stress system flooding their system with cortisol. While you perceive a simple greeting, their sympathetic nervous system has registered an intrusion, a high-velocity stimulus that threatens their immediate sense of environmental stability. This isn't a matter of personality or affection. It is a fundamental clash of sensory processing. Cats possess a highly developed vomeronasal organ, a specialized chemosensory structure that detects pheromones, allowing them to map their social environment through scent, rather than the visual or tactile cues humans prioritize. When you loom over them, you aren't just a person, you're a massive, unpredictable source of sensory noise. Noise that disrupts their non-static load. The physiological cost of maintaining internal balance in a changing environment. Their aloofness is actually a sophisticated survival mechanism designed to minimize the risk of overstimulation. You haven't failed as a companion. You are simply attempting to initiate a social bond using a human-centric framework. A framework that ignores the biological reality of their sensory input. To bridge this gap, stop trying to force physical proximity. Instead, engage in a low-stakes, non-threatening micro-interaction. Sit on the floor, look away, and offer your index finger at nose level. Just keep it perfectly still. By acting as a stationary object rather than an active pursuer, you allow their vomeronasal organ to safely process your scent profile, processing it without triggering a defensive response. If they choose to approach and rub their cheek against your finger, they're performing a deliberate act of scent marking, effectively integrating you into their olfactory map. Stop. That internal narrative of failure is a human construct. It is not a biological reality. Your cat isn't rejecting your love. They're responding to a sensory input that their nervous system flagged as an immediate threat. When you loom over them, your height and sudden movement trigger their sympathetic nervous system, spiking their cortisol levels and activating the HPA axis, the same primal fight or flight mechanism they use to survive in the wild. To them, your attempt at a hug isn't an act of affection. It is a massive, unpredictable predator encroaching on their territory. You aren't failing them. You're simply speaking two different biological languages. You're operating from a human social framework that equates physical closeness with intimacy, while they operate from a feline survival framework that equates physical space with safety. Their brain is wired to prioritize the integrity of their personal space, all to maintain a low allostatic load. When they retreat, they aren't being mean or ungrateful. They're simply managing their own physiological stress levels. You haven't broken the bond. You've just been misinterpreting their defensive safety protocols as personal disdain. The shift is simpler than you think. Instead of trying to bridge the gap with forced physical contact, try the low-profile approach. Tonight, when you enter the room, don't look at them directly. Simply sit on the floor, well away from their hiding spot, and occupy yourself with a book or your phone. By lowering your center of gravity and removing the predatory eye contact, you effectively deactivate their threat response. Give them the space to observe you without the pressure of an interaction. If they approach, keep your movements slow and deliberate. Try giving them a series of long, slow blinks, a feline signal of non-aggression, and just wait. Let them be the ones to decide when the social buffer is safe to cross. You'll find that when you stop demanding their presence, they're far more likely to offer it on their own terms. Instead, you're met with a stiff body, a sharp flick of the tail, and a sudden retreat under the sofa. You feel that familiar sting of rejection, wondering why your affection is being treated like a threat. From your cat's perspective, your direct gaze and sudden reach are not expressions of love. They're high-intensity triggers for their sympathetic nervous system. In the wild, a prolonged, unblinking stare is a predatory signal, a clear precursor to an attack. When you loom over them, their HPA axis spikes, flooding their system with cortisol. They aren't being ungrateful. They're experiencing a genuine physiological stress response. Their pupils dilate, their muscles tense, and their brain shifts into a survival mode, where your presence is categorized as a potential hazard rather than a companion. We often misinterpret their biology through a human lens. We assume that because we find comfort in touch, they must as well. But cats process the world through a complex sensory array, including the vomernasal organ and highly sensitive whiskers. Whiskers that detect even subtle shifts in air pressure. When you force an interaction, you're overriding their need for social buffering. You aren't failing as a pet owner. You're simply speaking two different biological languages. This does not mean you failed your cat. It usually means you were reading a feline safety system with human assumptions. The solution isn't more training or expensive gadgets. It is a radical shift toward passivity. Tonight, try the slow blink technique. When you see your cat sit on the floor, look slightly away, and slowly close and open your eyes. This is a non-threatening, affiliative signal that mimics their own way of communicating safety. And please don't reach out. Watch your pet closely tonight. Which tiny signal looks different now? Now that you're looking for safety and stress instead of attitude, leave that detail in the comments.